All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the InterDrone Podcast, your 30,000-foot view of the commercial drone industry. My name is CJ Smith with the InterDrone team, joined today with Michael Pehel with InterDrone, and we have two fantastic guests with us today. We're joined with Ramon Roche. He is the program manager for Dronecode, and Ginger Zhang. She's the community manager at Dronecode. They just finished the PX4 Developer Summit about 2 weeks ago. So really excited to have them on here today and talk about the success of the event and kind of the progress Dronecode and PX4 have been making in both open source flight control software for drones and unmanned vehicles. So Ramon, thanks again for being here. If you wouldn't mind just giving us a brief overview about yourself, Dronecode, PX4, and talk to us just a little bit about the summit that happened a few weeks ago and some of the key takeaways.
Yeah, definitely. Hey, well, first of all, thank you for the intro. Happy to be here at the podcast. The PX4 community celebrated another year of awesome content with the PX4 Dev Summit, July 6th and 7th. It was an amazing event. We had 1,600 registrations. We blew out of our expectations. Everything that we thought we were going to get, we doubled. And we're really happy because the community came together. We want to thank our sponsors and partners. The Developer Summit was the opportunity that we wanted to create for the community to come together, network, socialize, learn about the developments of the PX4 ecosystem. It was also a great opportunity to have a milestone for the dev team to come together and evaluate the overview of the open source projects, where we are with things, and get a chance to explain all of that to the development community. One of the main goals behind this event was to reach outside our community, try to go out and get other communities to join us, to look at what's going on at this small open source community that is not so small anymore. We've been growing tremendously over the last few years. Thank you for guys for that. You've been doing awesome promoting all the open source projects. Thank you. The Dronecode members helped put this great event together. Dronecode is an open source nonprofit. We hold the open source projects. We help them. We nurture them. We nurture the communities, and we help open standards get created, and we help communities settle, and we help the companies that are in those communities tackle problems together and create standards. One of the benefits of becoming a member for Dronecode is that you get to participate in work groups, and those work groups ultimately happen in frequency of time, let's say weekly, bi-weekly. And for this year's summit, we had a few results out of those work groups, like the hardware work group, the PIXOC special interest group. They had a great panel. They had lots of presentations about the PIXOC standards that are coming next. Those are PIXOCs, the new PIXOCs FMU standards, PIXOC payload standards, PIXOC smart battery management modules, and also the new UAV CAN drone special interest group that we formed. So it's overall the week to be for PX4. We had lots of fun. It was really exhausting for me personally. It's 2 days of just speaking out loud, trying to reach out to the community, but it was very rewarding, to be honest. Having everyone come together at their forums and our Slack, just very, very, very emotional, and everyone was feeling it, and we're really excited. It's just a great moment to be at the PX4 community right now.
Yeah, to put it into some perspective for people, the PX4 team is the core team is pretty, or not the PX4 team, the Dronecode team, core team is pretty small, but you ran an event with community support, really, that is about half the size of the program of InterDrone, which our program is 80 sessions. So,
wow,
yeah. For yours to be, I think it was 38 videos I just counted this morning. It's pretty impressive, and that's not even talking about all the networking conversations and what I was at the event last year to kind of see the community move forward around centralized ideas. Like where are we? Reflect on the previous year. Where do we want to go? What is something we shouldn't be focusing on anymore? What is something that we should? And that's just kind of awesome to see it for second year now. So that now it's a tradition, right?
It's definitely a tradition. We're trying to make this our flagship event and try to program or year around this event so that we have something to bring to the community. And like you were saying, that thanks for putting that into perspective. We had, I think, 47 sessions. We're still uploading all the videos to YouTube. And we had 56 speakers. So it was logistically wise. So it's just like a nightmare to schedule all those
virtual
all those slots, like getting coordinated with all the speakers, all the different time zones. We had people like speakers from Korea, Moscow, Cambridge, Seattle, San Diego, Zurich, Nepal, Tokyo, and it's just all over the world. And dealing with like network connectivity issues, like I'm sure and you're very aware that hosting a video conference call in 2020 is still not a solved problem.
I don't know why. I mean, we should have been there already, but yeah.
I'm hoping this situation is going to help us push that forward. And actually, I think it's helping us a lot right now. We had a total of 27,000 views for the event over the 2 days, which is to me awesome. We have 5,000 hours of watch content on our video on the YouTube channel. And we had at some point 1,000 peak concurrent viewers. So like 1,000 people watching distributed across all different channels. So we were streaming through YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Bilibili, which is a Chinese YouTube similar service. And we had 1,000 people somewhere around the start of day one. And it's just so cool to be able to introduce the speakers to the community and be behind the scenes and just like
Ramon
chatting
is
with them.
secretly a fanboy of every speaker.
I am. And I actually felt like I was just having dinner with friends and introducing to the whole community who they were and what they were doing. And I was having a blast, to be honest. So it wasn't really like work for me. It was just being with friends, sort of like we're doing right now.
That's great. So let's take a break from the summit and let's cover the news from the week, and we'll return to kind of going into detail about what's going on with the community for the year.
Definitely. Yeah. A lot more to ask you about the event, and we'll get to all of that. Just want to touch on two news stories from the past week. As our listeners may know, every week we discuss a couple news stories and then we jump into an interview with our interview guest. So the two stories we want to talk about this week are talking about Skydio and FLIR. So first off, Skydio shifts to military and enterprise with its first folding drone. So as many in the community are probably aware, the Skydio X2 was released last week, I believe. It's the first non-consumer device produced by Skydio, and it's marketed toward government agencies, the military, and other organizations that require aerial surveillance or surveying with its own built-in infrared thermal camera. The X2 announcement coincides with Skydio's new round of $100 million of funding led by German multinational company Siemens, their Next 47 firm. So, Mike, I know we touched on this briefly last week, but Ramon, just love to hear some of your high-level thoughts on the X2. What do you think about Skydio kind of making this shift? We even also talked about last week that Skydio was one of the 5 U.S. companies selected to receive some DoD funding through the CARES Act as a response to the current pandemic. So it's kind of a lot of interesting things happening around Skydio right now. What do you make of the X2?
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. So to begin with, I think it's a great machine. It's mind-blowing what they did. Skydio was able to put the Skydio learnings into a better form factor and put it into a commercial enterprise product. And see them do that transformation is actually really interesting. And I'm excited for this product. It's actually like having a quad-core ARM A57 chip inside and having NVIDIA technology. It just makes this a very competing product. I gotta say that the payload is actually on point. The form factor to me is actually incredible. So I look forward for the future for this product because I think it's actually a step in the right direction. I think you're gonna start seeing lots of more standardization So a lot more work done in regulation, and products like this are going to start popping up more. And like you're saying, this is they usually receive a lot of funding from the DoD, and you start seeing lots of other companies going into that direction as well. And you're going to see them standardize on definitely open components. Let's say MapLink. There's a mandate right now from the DIU to adopt MapLink, and you can see them right now. Actually, I don't know if this is a secret or not. It's up there on the website.
What's the DIU for the listener? They might not be informed like we are.
The Defense Innovation Unit. And I think what Skydio did was just implement MapLink, and they now have integration with QGround Control. QGround Control is the open source mission planning software that is on the PX4 ecosystem. And it's widely used out there. It's being used by Unique, it's being used by Altharian, it's being used by the open source community. So it's definitely out there and has lots of integrations already.
Cool.
Yeah, so I have like two things that I'm curious about here. Is one, it was a while back, CJ, that we heard when Brian Garrett Glazer was on about the government supporting private industry. So that I'm curious if some of the funding that actually came in on the other side, the $100 million that they raised, was supported through that effort, or that's something we'll see later. So that's something to kind of keep an eye on. And then secondly, last year when the Skydio 2 came out, it was both exciting, but also a little perplexing because I thought there would have been more of a move towards enterprise then. And, they have some of the best engineers in the world working on their tech. So it's really nice to kind of see that a lot of effort over the last, let's figure 7-8 months went into creating a fully integrated enterprise product that answered, enterprise questions. Because the original Skydio 2, amazing drone, but that rigid form factor, and then kind of some of the control limitations for the end user was never going to make it a real enterprise product. So, one for Team America here,
right.
with a really, really great drone. And I'm excited to see more about the capabilities in the coming months. We're talking with their team, see if we could kind of get some news out over the next couple months about what's going on. And yeah, if they could take what they did with software in the first kind of couple years of their company and now make that, refine their hardware, I think you're going to have a really interesting force in the drone industry on the U.S. side that we haven't had since the 3DR days.
Sure.
Definitely. And I want to just say something quickly, and I want to echo what you said about the Skydio 1 and how it felt a bit rigid. And when they launched it, it felt a bit, I don't want to say outdated. It felt like they shipped too late in my perspective. The UX was great. The engineering work was awesome. But the form factor to me was a bit outdated to what the industry needed. But this is essentially what they should have done. Like, it's the great user experience, great product, and it's targeting the right audience. And I think this is going to be a success. And in the future, I would like to see them and any other manufacturer right now adopting more open standards. They did a great first step with MapLink. I want to see them going forward. It would be awesome in the future if we can see interchangeable payloads. It would be awesome if we can see different interchangeable parts, smart battery management units, and things like that. I think those are the things that are details, but ultimately are going to start affecting the end users, or if you have a drone program, you're going to start wanting to know that if you make an investment to payload accessory, you can actually just take it out and put it into some other vehicle and not have to reinvest in all of those payloads and all of those accessories again and again per different platform that you have on your fleet.
Yeah, integrations is a sign of a mature ecosystem, right? And this is what we've been building to. I remember Lawrence last year saying, sort of kind of my tagline, but in a different context, that detect and avoid. shouldn't be considered proprietary technology or feature that you're selling, versus that should be our baseline, right? And we evolve our feature sets on top of what the open source kind of community gives you in terms of code base. I think Skydio right now, with the release of this drone, is showing that they kind of understand that. They have a feature, their level of kind of autonomy, that is something to sell on top of, more open standards.
Definitely.
It makes sense for them, the model.
Yeah. So just to recap, great hardware, great software. I see a bright future for them.
Ramon, can you just talk a little bit more about Mavlink and what that is and how Skydio is using it?
Yeah. Okay. I can't tell about how Skydio is using it right now specifically. I don't have all the details, but I can tell you more about Mavlink, what it is, and why I think they're adopting it. So Mavlink is the interface to speak with drones. So it's sort of like the lingua franca of drones. This was developed by Dr. Lawrence Mayer, which is the creator of PX4, ground control of all of the open source technologies, and he's also the co-founder of Autherian and chairman of Dronecode. Mavlink is the interface on which and the protocol on which you communicate with other drones, other accessories, and overall the ecosystem of drones within our community and other open source communities. So what's happening here is that it has a great open source license. And you can embed this into your products. It doesn't need to be a PX4 product. It can be anything like this product, like Skydio. They chose to adopt this thin layer on top of their product, and this makes it so that they're compatible with other Mavlink speaking accessories or vehicles. So this is going to allow them to be able to use, depending on how they implemented Mavlink, let's say the Map SDK, which is an SDK that the Dronecode community and the PX4 community put together to be able to communicate with this drone. So you can do things like build an app to control your drone. You can build an app to update it, to control the camera. You can control all the different details of your payload. You can get all the telemetry you need, and you can control and set up missions and like do geofencing and stuff like that. And we're basically abstracting all of the hard parts of the flight controller internals and make it into a language that you can just direct it and say, hey, go to X location and then go to this other location. And that's essentially like the missions and all of that is just summarized very quickly. And that's what's powering our mission planning software like ground control and our SDK. And this is compatible with PX4 and other open source flight controllers as well.
Great.
So if you've already programmed an application in the PX4 ecosystem, you can now communicate with the Skydio drone. You don't have to write a completely separate kind of layer to communicate with that drone, or that changes your instructions from here into whatever way Skydio in the past would have wanted to interpret it. So they've kind of done that translation for you by hooking into Mavlink.
Right.
Exactly.
Created a standardized language.
And it remains to be seen, honestly. I haven't had the chance to have one of those vehicles in my hands, so it remains to be seen if they open the ports for you, the right ports to be able to communicate through Mavlink, and how accessible they make this to you, or if they're just shipping this to certain specific customers. I honestly don't know, but I hope they enable this for all of their X2 cells.
So they've got my bid to do so.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, guys, let's jump into the second article. So FLIR introduces Hadron, which is a dual sensor module for drones. So the latest FLIR product, this new dual sensor module, the camera module has been produced to reduce development costs and speed how quickly manufacturers can integrate the sensor with their drones. The new module is equipped with a 12 megapixel visible camera and a FLIR boson thermal camera with a resolution of 320 by 240. Ramon, you mentioned that you guys over at PX4 had been in talks with FLIR a little bit about this product, and can you talk to us a little bit more about that and how they may be using some of your guys' software?
Yeah, definitely. So first of all, FLIR is a proud Dronecode member. They're a silver member. They've been a member for quite a while now, and we're working with them to get their payloads integrated into the PX4 ecosystem. So actually, speaking of MapLink, guess what? We have a protocol, a sub-protocol for payloads, and what that does is just translates all of the different interfaces or features out of the camera and enables you to use our SDK to control it. I know that there's already support for the FLIR Hadron, and any other camera manufacturer can also adopt this. FLIR is working with us very closely on the Pehel work group, and they're really excited to bring this capability because this is going to enable other manufacturers to adopt their sensors and just use the MapLink protocol on top so that they can communicate with this camera without having to rewrite everything from scratch. So you get all the functionality out of the door.
So I want to say cool name on this one, Hadron Collider. So really kind of thoughtful execution on this piece of gear. How does this compare to the XT2?
How does this compare to the XT2? That's actually a good question.
I feel like that was 8 megapixels. Maybe I'm wrong.
I think it is. I'm looking at it right now. So it's a 4K 60p on the XT2. It doesn't actually say which one it is, right?
No. Well, let's see. I got here. We have 12 megapixel, 320 by 240 on the Hadron. So.
Yeah, I would be surprised if it's something radically different.
Well, we're talking at least 2 years, right? That's how long it's been since the XT2, and that was a pretty amazing piece of tech itself. So nice to see that FLIR is still innovating, and yeah, I'm excited to see kind of results. I'm sure that Brett and Randall over at FLIR will have some videos with this thing very soon to kind of show off to me.
Definitely. So can I say something real quick?
Sure. Yeah.
I love that FLIR is doing this and that they're putting their hardware out there, and they did the initial work on the software protocol. So standardizing on software was a huge success. I think the next step forward for the industry and FLIR and everyone else is to adopt hardware standards and standardize on interfaces so that we can actually get to a future where just plug and play cross-platform functionality. That would be ideal for the end user. Where guess what? We have a standard and a work group right now which is working towards that. We're trying to standardize payload connectors. So like we have bottom connector, we have a front connector, and what those do is they give you the interfaces, the hardware interfaces to connect to a hardware camera, and then they enable the software, which is the same that we spoke of, the MapLink software, to run on top of it and standardize the whole thing so you don't really have to do anything. And manufacturers, all they need to do is either create an accessory to connect to this hardware standard or develop an interface for that connector specifically. And all those connectors and all of that information is already open and it's out there on the hardware work group for Dronecode hardware work group, and that's on our forums, and you can look that up right now.
So yeah, we haven't reached kind of our USB standard for connectors here in the drone industry, right? So imagine like going from laptop to laptop, and I can't connect my USB microphone because you're on this standard versus another, or you've just made up your own connector and you want to sell your own gear on top of it, which
like
is
Apple.
Well,
exactly.
Well, when you have that kind of weight to throw around, that's what happens. But
yeah, well, it's actually happening right now in the industry where a lot of these companies are having to create their own or choose their own connectors because there's no de facto standard. And what happens is that every company, when they want to develop a payload, they end up doing the research again and again. And you have to consider a lot of things like power, the data that goes through, any network connectivity you might need. Maybe you want to have a smaller companion computer next to that payload accessory that needs to connect.
And that affects how you could code the apps, because if you can't guarantee a certain level of reliability on the signal, or what data is being transferred, or how much voltage is going through that thing, you're coding for worst case scenarios, or you're over coding to kind of make sure that you're covering every use case. Kind of like for web devs out there, like trying to code for every outdated version of Internet Explorer over the years to make sure your HTML doesn't break.
Exactly. So that's just a great analogy, because that's one of the things that we're doing as part of Dronecode. We're trying to get all of the different companies that are in the PX4 ecosystem to adopt the latest standards, to adopt the latest software, so you don't fall behind, you don't get outdated, and push the industry forward together. And that's really important. And having a community that is backing you up in that regard is incredible, because you don't have to invest in all of that research up front. You don't have to do it alone. And with having a foundation and a community behind you, you have events, you have lots of content that gets generated, and you have weekly touch-ins with the dev team. So that's a lot of the things that you get. It's a benefit of participating in open standards and in open communities. And I'm not advocating specifically about ours, although ours is awesome. But there's other communities as well. And this is a way to start working. And I want to see a lot more players in the industry adopt this way of working.
Yeah, this brings me back to something you said to me. I think it was the last time we met in California. So timeline, that has to be like October last year.
Probably.
We were talking about, I was talking about John Carmack kind of putting things in terms of human hours worked on a project, and as kind of the singular measure on whether or not, or how long we'll see X technology hit. And you corrected me in a way that I won't forget, because I've seen it elsewhere since you kind of brought up this way of looking at it. And then there's governance, right? So you could have lots of humans working on lots of separate projects all over the place, and you're actually losing putting those human hours towards a set goal. So this is another thing that the PX4 community kind of drives, is we're setting the goals year after year, so we could actually drive progress. Progress will move faster if things aren't as splintered. We aren't at that level yet where we can say the story's done. I could be fully proprietary, or I own this corner of the market. Nobody does yet. And that's kind of why it's still exciting to cover. 5 years from now, I'll be bored with drones when everything's written, I guess.
Yeah, thanks for that, Mike. Thanks for the reminder. I think, I think that's one of the great benefits of being in the industry, in this community. And if I say so myself, it's not magic. It's actually us going into meetings weekly. Like after this podcast, I'm actually going into the hardware work group, and have regular meetings with them. And it's just day-to-day work that you have to do. And it's on us, on Ginger Sang, the community manager, and on the program manager, that's me, and the Dronecode board, and the different work groups, and the PX4 dev team. And at the end of the day, we're every day just interacting together and trying to put things in a way that is easy for newcomers to digest, to get into and jump on and give their first step, and also trying to drive the technology forward on the cutting edge. So it's going from 0 to 10 in any given day. We jump from different meetings. It's just a global effort. You wouldn't believe how many meetings we have on a weekly basis. It's a lot of human hours. So just to give you an example, the hardware work group gets around 10 engineers. So those are senior engineers, lead engineers, and that's that's really expensive meeting that we have. It's an hour long weekly. Then we have the PX4 dev team meeting, and has around 25 on average from assistants. And so 25 PX4 engineers. Just imagine how expensive that must be. So flight control engineers, hardware engineers, roboticists, computer vision engineers, simulation engineers, everyone's there, and just to help the community push forward. And I want to invite your audience to go and see it, because those meetings are open. You can just go to our forums. You can find the links. You can join us. We give the opportunity to interact with the dev team. We have an open space. We talk about the releases or roadmaps. We talk about different components like computer vision or ROS interfaces or UAV kind interfaces. We also talk about control architecture, navigation, estimation. We go really in depth in all of those topics on all of those meetings and just give a status update of where things are. So it's a great way to just jump in and see, hey, what's going on with this community? Just go to that call. You're going to immediately know what we're going on and we're doing. And you're also going to meet us. And I think that's the most important takeaway. You get to learn who these guys that are doing all of this are, because it kind of seems like it's just happening out there. The mythical open source engineer that is just pushing commits out there and is just doing it for free. We're not. It's a lot of engineers that are hired by other companies, Dronecode members mostly, and they're doing a huge investment in doing this. Like companies like Ethereum, they hire a lot of PX4 engineers and they let them work on open source and they let them contribute back. So that's a huge percentage of their time that are contributing back to open source.
Yeah, and that kind of makes it unique in some of the communities that I think of, like, you know, say the Blender Foundation, where there's money made there, but it's or paid to people who contribute to that community at the higher levels, but that's from donations, right? So what you're seeing here is actual enterprise commitment to growing this ecosystem, because every enterprise involved sees this as basically securing their future in growing their own brand. And it's nice to see that level of collaboration. And let's face it, it wasn't always there, especially not at the levels that we're seeing now. So to see it kind of moving along incrementally over the years is exciting. I mean, you know, just thinking back to like InterDrone 1, you know, how much involvement did we even have with Dronecode back then? We knew of them. We invited people from your community to speak. We had speakers at the show, but it wasn't actually an organized effort even then, you know, and then we're here years later and, you know, we've committed to supporting the community kind of full on throughout the year.
And I want to thank you for that. It's really great to have partners that are helping put this out there. It's not easy in these times to actually be a successful player in this industry. This pandemic times is just hard for everyone. And this is where we got to come up together, and not just different communities. We actually have to come together, like InterDrone community and the Dronecode community and every other community. Right now, we're just one industry, and the only way we're going to survive and push this forward is if we can work together and learn that there's still a lot of space for everyone to expand and go for. I think there's a lot of verticals that are still not being explored. I think there's still a lot of benefits and a lot of great things to come forward in this industry. There's a lot of regulation work that is happening right now, which is everyone's
good work.
Finally,
yeah. It was an optimistic May and June and July, actually.
Yeah.
So, strange times to be optimistic about regulation, you know. But I was happy to see the Swiss FOCA thing. Did you see that recently? That was awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, I wish all this regulation talk was happening 2 years ago. To be honest, we would be like different. Speaking of different things right now, but I'm happy that this is happening, and I'm happy that a lot of companies. Let's say we have a new member, Iris Automation. They just joined a silver member. They were with us at the PX4 Dev Summit, and they were talking about the future of beyond visual line of sight, vertical takeoff and landing drones, and it's their number one message, and it's just a very fun anecdote, because we didn't really sync before the Dev Summit between us and Iris Automation, and their main message was, let's standardize and let's come together and let's work together. And it was mind-blowing to me, because that's our message and that's what we wanted to do. And they catched it, and they came to the summit and they presented without having prior touch with us and like prior conversations about this. And those are the things that we want to keep seeing forward in the future. We want to invite everyone that's like listening, watching right now, to join us on those standardization talks. We want to learn from the industry what's happening, what's needed. We want to learn from regulation bodies and what's the technical necessities right now. What is it that we can help with? And we want to help push this forward with open standards. I think that's the right way to go right now. Yeah. And if you allow me, I want to say one quick thing about Dronecode, because you were touching about the Blender Foundation, how they work and how they operate. And I was talking about the gigantic effort of community volunteers and dev team and all that, and how different companies volunteer and let their employees work on open source. So Dronecode is actually a nonprofit. That's why they do this, because we protect them. This is a safe space for sharing. We have a open governance. It's made up by our members, or Dronecode members, who have 3 different tiers: silver, gold, platinum, depending on which interaction level you want to have with the community. Obviously, the bigger you go, it's because you really have an investment in this community. Let's say our platinum member out there, they do enterprise PX4, so it's a right match for them to be in platinum. We have Microsoft, NXP, Unique, 96 boards. We have 3DR. We have Fleur. We have Teal, like we're just discussing. We have a bunch of members, and the way you support Dronecode and how we do this and the way we put this together is by getting those memberships. And that's the second best way to collaborate and contribute back to the open source community, is by becoming a member. Number 1 is submit a pull request and fix issues, set pull request and add new features. But honestly, it's thanks to our members that we're able to put this great events together. They're paying for things like managed salary, the CI infrastructure that builds PX4 and all the different open source projects. We had until recently a PX4 test pilot team that goes out to the field and tests daily changes to the PX4 open source project. So it lets us focus on developing the open source projects and putting the community together and focusing everyone towards the same goals. And it lets the companies focus on their products and their projects. And there's this level of trust that we're going towards the same goals and we're working together, and this sense of community that you wouldn't get otherwise. Okay. Yep. So I think it's overall a great future for the industry, and regulation is a much welcome change. And I want to see this being more and more discussed, because I don't think we've been discussing this enough. I think I want to see more changes from the regulation bodies, and I want to see us interacting more with them. I want to see more spaces like this where we can talk about this and what's happening and what our thoughts are, because that's really important as well, because you get to see the news and what happened, the press release, but you don't get to hear what's the thoughts are behind those engineers. You don't get to hear what the thoughts are behind those community leaders. So those are things that are important as well. So having spaces like InterDrone Podcast, this is a great way to interact and engage with the community. So I want to see. Thank you for this as well.
Yeah, that's been kind of one of the new goals of the new format, is to kind of bring what happens at the show. For me, what makes it so exciting for me is talking to all the experts in all their individual fields and realizing I'm this tiny piece of something really kind of ginormous. But all those kind of conversations that I'm able to consolidate, the podcast with the new format allows people to actually engage with those people the same way that I do at the show. You get to hear them talk in a more kind of casual level and with a level of excitement about what they're doing that you just kind of can't get elsewhere. Community is ultimately what every human project is built upon. When we think about the space race, people can kind of couch it in terms of international technology warfare, but let's face it, what was inspirational about space and how you were able to get all those engineers was the basic premise of human endeavor and outdoing yourself. And to get people to committed to that project as a community is what it's a community of thinkers, right? To solve a problem is what ultimately got us to the moon.
Sure. Ramon, I want to ask you about something people call it co-opetition. And I'm just wondering, so setting standards for an emerging industry like this, how important is it for companies, like, for instance, let's say Mike makes sensors and I have a company that makes sensors, but if we adopt either the same programming language or we're adopting the same connectors, we're no longer fighting for the same piece of the pie. We're actually making that pie a whole lot larger. And so I guess how important is that for this industry and for, potentially competitive companies to kind of embrace some sort of standards, some sort of type certification and actually get better results as an industry and grow the entire industry rather than fight over the same piece of the industry?
Yeah, great question. So one of the main questions that we get asked is this one, actually. It's, we get the standard, we adopt the standard, then how do we differentiate, right? Like, what is this? Why are we different from this other competitor? So it's a simple answer, actually. Like, we're not actually standardizing on cutting edge features. We're not standardizing on any differentiators. So we're allowing companies to differentiate on top of the standard. So let's say, like last year, Mike was at the Dev Summit in 2019 at ETH Zurich. Lawrence Mayer was saying, we have computer vision and you don't need to differentiate at this level. This should be a given. Like, we have all this technology and this is the base layer. And we're expecting you to go ahead of this and differentiate on top. So we're hoping that the different service providers or manufacturers can actually go after their vertical and look at what their customers need and differentiate by catering specifically to them instead of just through the whole large drone ecosystem, because it's huge and we care for different things. Let's face it. But by standardizing, let's say you have different payloads for different verticals and you have standardized on connectors and you have standardized on software. So you're cutting back your costs on research, you're cutting back your costs on development, you're cutting your costs on manufacturing, but you're adding those special pieces that the different verticals care for, and that's your job. And that's what you should be doing, not having to reinvent the wheel, not having to reinvent all those protocols. And that's what we're doing here. So we have the payload, and I've been touching a lot about payload recently, but we also have the flight management unit, which is PixHawk. PixHawk has been around for, I think, more than 10 years now. Outerion just released the Skynode, which is PixHawk plus companion computer. There's a lot of manufacturers that have different PixHawk boards that are out there. There's FMU B5, B6, B5X, B6X. There's lots of different standards that companies can adopt. And it doesn't mean that if you release a product with this standard, you're going to be the same as this other one.
Right.
It's up to you, honestly. If you just want to do the minimal effort and just get the standard out there, then basically what you created is a development board, because it's just the basics and that's what is going to get you up and running. But it might not be a specialized product for your vertical. It depends on what you need and how you as a company want to target your users.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's also important to kind of understand where we are in the kind of evolution of this technology as far as standardization. I know Lawrence and Kevin have kind of touted the car industry model for a while. But let's take that to its logical end, right? So they talk about the early kind of standardization. How do we get to the, these are the screws we use. These are the kind of engine connectors. Right. This is the standard wheelbase size. But take that to another level. We're still at that point in the industry where we haven't even reached that. But if you go to where we are now, every car is very, very similar, but they still are distinct in the sense that they sell, features, they sell user interface, they sell the feeling of being rich. We haven't reached that kind of artificial level of what you're selling. We're still selling on features, even if you use the code base, the standardized code base that PX4's community provides.
Right.
Yep.
I think that analogy, rebuilding the wheel, is really a good example. And I mean, especially in a regulated industry like this, if you need to rebuild the wheel, you might need to get that new wheel re-regulated, which is actually a whole nother issue of just time and money in itself. So I think, getting that baseline where everyone agrees, regulations in place, and then you can really start to build on top of that in Excel and add the features which maybe don't take as much regulatory approval, and you can get those out the door quicker and just make things possible and more efficient.
That's a really insightful point. And I think if you look at the way regulation has gone, because it's aerospace, it's a lot tighter than even what the car industry would have been, right? Mm-hmm. And at some point, if there's kind of a field of types certifications that are available, if you're not building to that spec, you're actually just out of business. And clearly, what a community can provide, a larger community can provide, and just human hours committed to specific kind of, let's say, type certified piece of hardware, then you could guarantee if you're on that when the ocean rises, you're rising with that boat.
Exactly.
So what's the future of, what's the near future for the PX4 community? What are you expecting to see as far as developments in hardware over the next 1 to 2 years?
So we're going to start seeing a lot of payloads. I already touched a lot about this, but we're going to see a lot of manufacturers adopt our payload interfaces. You're going to start seeing a lot of more companion computers and that have specific connectors that allow you to connect to PixHawks better. You're going to start seeing lots more standardization around all those different hardware components and how reliable they are. You're going to start seeing a lot of more automotive parts on those hardware parts. You're going to start seeing a lot of more advancements in software. You're going to start seeing lots of more regulation talk. I want to invite your audience to go see Chris Anderson's talk on the Dev Summit about PX4 and getting FAA type certification.
Yeah, we talked with him a little bit. What was it, 2 episodes ago?
2 or 3.
Right before the summit.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, that I haven't seen that talk yet, but I'm sure it's going to be a great deep dive.
Yep, and I want to make an announcement right now. We're going to launch an executive series of webinars specifically targeted towards the drone industry about drone standards, all of our hardware standards. We're going to have a monthly webinar series joined by the workgroup members and different companies that are adopting those standards. And we're going to be talking about things like, why would you adopt this? How did you adopt this? How do you work with the open source communities? What's the benefits of adopting right now versus later? How can this help you standardize? How can this help you save costs in development and research? So we're going to start adopting and talking about all those key points that I know some of your audience love to hear, and I know that the industry needs right now. So we're not just talking bluntly right now. We have a plan, and we're going to start seeing lots of more content created towards that different persona. Dronecode is going to be launching this Dronecode webinar series, I think, in a month from now. And I want to invite all of your audience to go check that out. I'm going to share more news as they come on that end.
Awesome.
Yeah.
CJ, you got another question for
him?
Come on, guys. I'm ready for you.
I mean, what were some of the biggest takeaways from the summit? I mean, you mentioned Chris Anderson's talk. I mean, you said there were almost 50 or so panels. I mean, is there any ones that really stood out to you? And, we can obviously put those YouTube links in the description here.
Awesome. Yeah. So the main takeaways is we had 1,600 registrations. We had people from, I think, a total of 83 different countries. The main takeaways for me, like my favorite talks, I loved everything.
Sure.
But there's a lot of things that were surprising.
Gotta pick a favorite.
I'm gonna give you a few. A few. So
good.
There's a project that is using PX4 for satellites, so CanSats. That was really insightful. They have a different perspective from different community that is underrepresented right now, and I want to ask you to check that out. It's a very innovative use of PX4. There's also Jetman, a whole different use of PX4. Jets strapped into your back and flying, vertically taking off and playing out in the skies.
Wow.
That's really cool. We have a talk about that in the App Summit. There's a story by a high school robotics group that they took us from the journey from where they started working with drones, just using whatever they found online, in their journey into how they find PX4 and how they transformed their whole development cycle and how it helped them actually put things in the ground, start flying next day. That is actually a really good video. That was one of my favorites. We have the Pixar panel, like I was mentioning, the Pixar team. They didn't even put a slideshow. They were just answering questions and trying to give you all the info. Like they had so much good insights and good conversations that we don't even need slideshow. We need to just go out there and talk to.
Who was that? Jonas and Julian, and or
that was Nuno Marcus, Peter van der Berg from MSP, Alex Slimak from Mark Electronics, and Lawrence Mayer from out there. That was a really cool one. We have a live, so we have a session on extending our SDK by Jonas Bothering. He's been doing presentations Mav SDK for a couple of years now. I think it's 3. And he's been doing this live demos on every talks, and he keeps on going. And it worked out perfectly this time. And he even submitted a pull request live, and it got merged before his talk ended. It was kind of cool. So that was a good one. I can mention some of the top rated ones. The keynote was the top rated ones. We have talk about lightweight software architecture for PX4 computer vision by Model AI. That was a really cool one. They were introducing their hardware platform, the Voxel Flight hardware. We have a lot of talks by 2 talks by Microsoft. They're introducing the AirSim simulator, how they're using that right now out there. That was a great talk. We have also Hardware Games 2 announcement. So NXP launched their second iteration of their Hardware Games Challenge. And it's about fighting the pandemics with drones. And it's a really cool challenge for drone developers or enthusiasts that want to get started with PX4. They sell you a kit. It's like, I think somewhere like $300, and you assemble it and get started developing with PX4. And the goal is to create a future or a cool prototype to help solve deliveries in pandemics or anything that will help society right now. And they have cash prices, hardware prices, and they're introducing all of that in the summit. So those are the main sessions. I can tell you that 75% of people that were attending the summit were using PX4 for work already. So there are the 1,600. We had, so 96% of them at the end said that they were likely to return to another event, which is really great news for us. And 94% would recommend to a friend or colleague. So that's just great numbers to us. People were giving us great feedback about the content by RE. We had everywhere, because we had things from getting started to cutting edge. We were getting lots of good feedback about the quality of the speakers and the presentations. To be honest, being a community-led event, we don't get to control that to 100%. There was a content committee that decided which sessions were going to be out there. They have a call for proposals. This was not like I was choosing my friends to talk to, like I said at the beginning. Sort of, it felt like that because I knew most of them, but the community decided the content that we.
That's how InterDrone feels to me now.
At this point,
yeah.
Which, by the way, I look forward for the next InterDrone event. I look forward to interact with your community and having PX4 Dronecode presented there and talking to everyone. And I want to congratulate you for this podcast because it sort of feels like the hallway track for InterDrone, and you guys actually didn't get all the insights. So it's really cool.
Give the best thing away for free, right? That's
Of
the
course,
idea.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Ramon, at a really high level, I mean, we've seen the pandemic impact the industry in a number of ways. We've seen drones maybe in mainstream media more just due to kind of creative drone deliveries. We've seen a BV loss waiver. We've seen DoD funding. We've also heard some poor stories, and just that there is less money going around. Smaller startups are having troubles. I mean, you just finished an event with 15, 1,600 people. I guess what was the general sentiment? Are people still really optimistic? I mean, obviously it's a tough time no matter what industry you're in, but I guess just some high level thoughts on how the pandemic is impacting the industry as a whole right now.
I think it's the best time right now to standardize and work together. There's definitely, I wouldn't say there's less money. I would say that people are spending less, and rightly so. Right now, you gotta be careful. Yes. Exactly. Yeah. And you gotta be smart about where you invest. So making sure that your investment gives you a good return and that you're actually working towards something tangible is paramount right now. So I want to encourage everyone to jump into open standards and collaborate openly. The general overview, like feeling from the Dev Summit that I got, and the impression is that there's lots of research going on, lots of PX4 projects going on, lots of industry projects going on, and they want to start working together because they realize that they're everyone working silo mode is not working out, and we got to start sharing knowledge. And there's not a better place to do it than in open source community and an open collaborative platform like Dronecode has. And I want to encourage everyone, honestly, to jump on board and start working together with us. We're really friendly. I'm a really friendly guy. And the developer community is actually really approachable. We have good diversity. We have lots of great members and engaged members. So please join us and say hi. Even if you don't know where to get started, just send us an email, reach out through Slack, jump to our forums, send a comment here on this video. We'll look it up and we'll reach out to you. We can help you get started. It's can feel a bit like it's too much or it's too hard or too complicated. We're trying to lower the barrier of entry. We know that we're not perfect, and we know that there's a lot of work that still needs to be done, and we want to do it together with you. So let's collaborate.
Great.
So thanks again for joining us. I've been kind of saving your podcast for the right time of year so we could talk about the summit. Yeah, it
let's
sounds
make
like
this a tradition.
Yeah. I mean, it kind of
after
already is.
InterDrone Podcast.
Yeah, I was upset I couldn't make it to a summit this year. That it was really kind of just fantastic to see what's going on the builder side of the community of the drone industry, right? Because so often we get kind of caught in the headlines and kind of headline grabbing, like who's ahead as far as the interest goes. And the truth of the matter is this industry is so based on hardcore reality. That hardware has to work. That software has to be able to transfer that data properly. So if you want to see where the industry is going, the PX4 Summit is a great start to get an idea of what's real and what you could bet your money on from the business side, what will be important, at least in the next 6 months to a year.
Right.
Thanks, Mike. And if you didn't catch the summit live, I want to encourage you to go to the PX4 YouTube channel. We posted all the video sessions out there, and you can watch again if you already watch it. And it's a lot of content, and it's out there, and it's free, and it'll get you started quickly.
Yeah, and we have PX4 content from InterDrone last year. That's free on our Launchpad site right now. So we're happy to support the PX4 and open source in general because we believe, like you do, that the stronger that community is, the better the industry will be overall.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. And I want to I guess you invited us already to create more content to Launchpad, and we're looking forward to those opportunities because, like I said before, we want to put this out there and we want to make sure that the community can reach our content, and we want to talk to everyone that's watching this right now, and having the opportunity to jump on board new platforms for the drone industry is exciting to us, and we really look forward to the future of Launchpad, and I want to see more PX4 content out there.
Awesome. And where can people find you? I know you said find us on the Slack, but be more descriptive. Where are the exact places people can find the PX4 community?
So Go to dronecode.org. You're going to find all the info for Dronecode. Go to px4.io. You're going to find all the overview of what PX4 is, the community. You're going to find links to their forums. You're going to be able to find different hardware that are right now using by commercial products out there. You can find accessories, payloads, flight controllers, motors, ESCs. You can find even contractors if you want to hire someone. You're going to find links to our Slack channel, which is our instant messaging platform, or forums, which is discussed at px4.io. You can find us on social media at px4autopilot, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter. Same for Dronecode, at Dronecode on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter. And reach out to us. Go to the Dronecode website, send us a message. We're here to help you.
Great. And for anybody that didn't catch all those, we'll put all the links in the description. So just click below and we'll take you to the Dronecode, PX4, YouTube channel, everything right down at the bottom. So, well, thanks again for being here, Ramon. Really appreciate it. Just fantastic to hear the success from the summit. And as kind of Mike has been saying, we're big supporters of all the work you guys do, of standardizations, open source, and just progressing and building a sustainable community. So thanks again.
George, Mike, I had lots of fun. Thank you for the opportunity, and thank you to your audience for allowing me to be in your screens.
Great. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. We will see you all next week. Take care.